Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Day One Cricket Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to speak to a guest who I've spoken to a lot on Instagram and messages and listened to his podcast a lot, but that's Mark. Mark, maybe introduce yourself, tell us a bit about what you do and what you cover in cricket.
Yeah, sure. My name's Mark Machado. I, by trade, am a kind of content maker, producer, journalist, all that kind of stuff. But I suppose my thing in cricket is the Sri Lankan cricket team. I'm actually only half Sri Lankan. My mum's side's from India, but I started the Murali podcast about 5 years ago. We talk about Sri Lanka almost every day at the moment because we're playing Bangladesh, and I'm been a cricket fan for almost as long as I can remember. And if I wasn't before 1996, that was the moment when I definitely got solidified in my feelings for Sri Lanka, and that alongside Liverpool Football Club are my kind of two great passions in life, I suppose.
So you drew the short straw with Sri Lanka over India, and also I guess you're doing well with Liverpool now, but
Yeah,
recently.
I mean, like in the teams that I could have supported, right? So growing up in West London, my options would have been Sri Lanka, India, and England. I mean, in the 90s, England just weren't at the races with cricket at all. And then the way the kind of family dynamic is that my mum's actually Anglo-Indian, so a lot of her family, all her immediate family lived around us and with us. And then my dad was fighting the kind of lone 10th wicket stand for Sri Lanka. Even though her brothers were quite keen, I supported it. My mum's brothers were quite keen, I supported India. My dad and his side kind of won out with Sri Lanka. And my first big sports awakening was 1996. Well, actually, I did watch 94 World Cup. I was about 8 years old in 94, and I was football World Cup. I was quite excited about that. My mum's brothers played a lot of cricket, and there was a lot of cricket in and around the house all the time. So I was watching that, and then '96 Cricket World Cup happened. At that point I didn't even know there were World Cups in cricket, and Sri Lanka went and won it. So I just thought this is normal, isn't it? That Sri Lanka win World Cup. So this is my team. And then later that summer, obviously we had the Euro '96, and that solidified me as a football fan as well. So it was a great year to be a kind of 10-year-old and witnessing a lot of sport. I also, at that point, I also thought maybe the England football team might win something. Little did I know that, all this time later, I think part of being a sports fan is actually, it's the melancholy of it all, right? And actually, as a kid, you get hooked on these like moments of glory. But then once you get into it, I'm coming off a Premier League season. I know it's a cricket podcast, so come and talk about football, but I'm coming off a Premier League season where I just see Liverpool barely lose a game and win the Premier League. But there was still, 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weekends before we'd won it, I was still thinking, that's it, we're going to just go on a losing run and Arsenal are going to pip us to it, right? I'm a very positive person and positive around sport, but sport always brings out the melancholy in people, doesn't it? So I think part of it, if you're a fan, is you got to take, and maybe it's timely that we're having this conversation for India fans on this day, because India played so well in the first test and still somehow managed to lose that game. But you gotta, would you trade that in for all the glorious victories that they've had in the past? I doubt it, right?
No, I think with cricket, especially touring away from home, you always have to celebrate the little victories. I think 5 centuries in the Test match, almost dominating England. I think you'd have taken that at the start of the series, especially given the seam attack and the way they're performing at the minute. But before we go on to India, obviously Sri Lanka are playing a huge Test match. It's sort of this new rivalry, the Mankad rivalry between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Obviously, you draw the first test and you're going pretty well in the second test. So how is it watching today? And obviously, Pathum Nissanka has really done a sterling job over the last 2 matches.
Yeah, so a kind of, for people watching or listening to this who haven't been following too much of Sri Lanka cricket in the last few years, firstly, I count yourself lucky because a lot of it's been quite grim. But secondly, I kind of want to say that there is some kind of shoots of recovery kind of in and around Sri Lankan cricket at the moment, and kind of the forefront of that is Pathum Nissanka. If you're an England fan, you might remember his incredible century at the Oval in the third test in the final test of the English summer last year. He's kind of since then he's been in quite sensational form. I think that was his return to Test cricket, and I think he's averaging 54 since then. He got 180 in the first innings in the first test. Today, and we're recording this at the end of the second day, Sri Lanka got Bangladesh all out for 240 odd, and Sri Lanka 290 for two, with Pathum very well set on 140 odd at the crease for the morning of day three. Sri Lankan cricket's in a bit of, I say obviously it's in a bit of flux. It's always in a bit of flux, right? If there's always something going on. Angelo Matthews retired after the first test, a test that actually I thought early on Sri Lanka should win this, and then I thought after day three, I think maybe Sri Lanka have kind of blown it a little bit. But actually at the end of it, my kind of conclusion a few days after that test in Gaul, I was like, I don't think that pitch was ever going to get 40 wickets. And actually, both sides were going to struggle to get 20. Gaul's quite a unique place to play Test cricket, and I think sometimes occasionally, it doesn't happen that often, they can get it wrong, and they ended up being the first draw in 12 years. This game's being played in Colombo, totally different pitch, and I think it's definitely I'd be very surprised that we didn't get a win or loss. So after 5 days. At this stage, I find it very difficult to see how Bangladesh could come back into it, just because Sri Lanka should bat from at least the kind of tea time tomorrow, right? Even if they have a semi-bad day and put on kind of 150, 200 runs from here, and then they've got, 2 and a bit days to bowl Bangladesh out and potentially get any runs they needed to get, but they're going to end up with quite a big lead. So I'm hoping that Sri Lanka, I think if Sri Lanka lose this, which, I've watched a lot of good positives turn into negatives by the Sri Lankan cricket team, so it could happen. I've seen that happen before, so I'm not saying it's out of, but if they lose it, it would be quite a feat. I kind of want to know how they would do it.
Yeah. I think the pitch is a bit of a seaming pitch as well. A lot of help for the seamers, and obviously Sri Lanka actually have a pretty decent seam attack. I watched them at the Oval in the final test against England. And you can sort of see I don't know if Vishal Fernando's playing, but, very good left-arm seamer, swings it, and then a few other of the seamers can actually do a job. I think they probably don't have that, one X-factor bowler like a Rabada, Cummins, or obviously Bumrah's sort of at a different level. Is there, and obviously Pathum, he doesn't play test matches, he's sort of shoehorned by CSK. Is that true?
So it's an interesting time to have this conversation, because there's a good piece in the ESPN Cricket Info by Fidel Fernando, who's one of their Sri Lanka writers, that's come out today, about how today, or this second test against Bangladesh, Sri Lanka's 4th test of the calendar year, and will be their last test of the year. They won't play another test. I think they're due to play the West Indies in 11 months' time. For me, it somehow feels kind of more pronounced with Sri Lanka than it does almost anyone else, in terms of, in the way that the best bowlers, so you mentioned Pathum there, Pathum has the potential to be the best seamer Sri Lanka have ever had. I don't think he'll ever play Test cricket, or if he does, I think he might end up playing 1 or 2 token Test matches in about 5 or 6, 7 years' time, essentially because I think it is true that all cricketers want to play Test cricket at some point. I don't think we're at a stage where cricketers are dreaming of just playing the IPL and T20 World Cups. And also, I think it's particularly difficult for Asian players to put their hand up and say, we're not going to play Test cricket, because I think cricket means so much in the subcontinent, that even someone like Pathum, if you're going to be I think there's a fairly good argument to make that actually CSK were more instrumental in his development as a player than anyone at Sri Lanka cricket. Obviously, I'm not discounting the actual coaches who coached him at school and at youth level and stuff like that. They were obviously incredibly important as well. But in terms of developing him to be a international player, someone at the top of his game, someone who's one of the best bowlers in the IPL, then that's really CSK have got to take credit for that. There's not much Sri Lanka cricket can take credit for pushing him to those levels. So I think because of that, I think it's unlikely he's going to be someone who gets more than a handful of Test caps. I think, when Sri Lanka were in England last year, there was a lot of people asking about where's Pathum, where's Tikshana, where is Hasaranga? They're probably the three Sri Lankan bowlers who people are most, if you watch a lot of T20 cricket, are most familiar with. And I was like, well, actually, Tikshana and Hasaranga have played white ball cricket, but they just don't have the time to develop their white ball skills. They've got to, if you're going to be brutal and cynical about it, they've financially, it makes no sense for them if Sri Lanka are getting paid only, if going to play only 4 tests a year, for them to go off and go, right, we're going to spend time trying to develop as test bowlers. I think the changes we're seeing with Sri Lanka have been in place with the West Indies for almost a decade now, and I think Sri Lanka and dare I say kind of New Zealand and arguably South Africa, definitely with their kind of batting, we're seeing that happen, you know, a little bit further along towards the path the West Indies are at, where their best, in terms of raw skill players, aren't playing Test cricket. And I think it's going to happen everywhere. I mean, you say that Pathum Nissanka is our best, or you know, one of the best format guys in the world. Bumrah is the best bowler in every format in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose there'll always be some exceptional players who'll always play all formats. But I think if you're a young Sri Lankan player, I'd find it really difficult to advise them to be like, yeah, think about how you're going to bowl in the IPL and think about how you're going to bowl Test matches. I'd be like, just focus fully on trying to get into the IPL.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a difficult one for the players because, as you said, Sri Lanka don't play much Test cricket. Then the money's just not there for them to practice those skills. But I guess in terms of viewership, I watched a bit of the first Test. Obviously, it was Angela Matthews' last Test. It seems to get decent viewers in the ground. Is it a viewership problem that, you know, people don't turn up to Test matches in Sri Lanka? Is it the same as India where you go and people work sort of Saturdays as well, so they don't really get to go to the ground? Is that sort of a similar vibe in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I think so. What they did with, I can't remember if this was the case for Gaul. I think there might have been a ticket fee for Gaul, but it was quite nominal. It wasn't so high. And also, I don't know if you've ever been to Gaul, but basically, if you want to, it's so essentially the cricket ground is in the. If you imagine that Sri Lanka is a teardrop, this isn't quite right, but it kind of explains it. Gaul is at the bottom of the teardrop, and then right at the bottom of the peninsula is Gaul Fort, which was built by the Portuguese a few hundred years ago, and the cricket ground is at the. If one ends the sea, it's at the land side of it. But the way it's built is you can basically watch the game without having to pay for it. Because you can just go stand above it, which means that it doesn't incentivize SLC to kind of have it as somewhere that's going to be a place where they're going to sell 20 or 30,000 tickets. But people do still come in. This Test in Colombo, interestingly, is free entry. Actually, the economics of it are quite interesting because there is an audience for Test cricket in Sri Lanka. Like India, again, it's not going to be. You're playing, you know, Sri Lanka basically play Bangladesh every year, right? And it's home and away every year, right? So that Bangladesh come every 2 years. You're not going to get packed out stadia for the first and second day of the Test match against Bangladesh in Colombo, even if it's free. But there is still a hardcore fans who are watching it. There's lots of Sri Lankans around the world who are interested in it. Sri Lanka has about over 20 million people living there. But the problem is, it's a low wage economy, so the market is quite small. Where Sri Lanka versus Bangladesh, if they can make it work viably, it's by getting a selling the TV rights to India, basically,
Okay.
and how much Sony Live or whoever is willing to pay for it. It costs about $500,000 to put on a Test match in Sri Lanka, and that's why quite often you'll get, if there's a 2-match series, they'll both just be in Gaul. Gaul's a cheaper place to host it because they don't have to worry about the stands and just the way it's set up. And if you can host both Tests in the same venue, then you get an economy of scale with it, basically. So that's why they host. So you kind of lose less money. When you speak to Sri Lanka cricket, the people who run it, they are quite keen to play as much Test cricket as possible. The problem is outside of the big three, and I know this is very well documented. This is no great reveal. Outside the big three, it's very difficult to make it pay. Sri Lanka cricket's great ally in the whole cricket universe, though, is the BCCI. And the BCCI are what Sri Lankan cricket people tell me is that the BCCI are very aware that they are essentially the financial ecosystem, right? Team India it's important to get them playing as much cricket as possible around the world. They know they need to go to Sri Lanka. They know they need to go to Zimbabwe. They know they need to play Afghanistan. And actually, if you look at it, in the last few years, they've done all that thing. They've done all that, right? Was it just after India won the World Cup last year they went to Zimbabwe? Yeah. And actually, in many ways, that's an absolutely incredible thing to have done, right? But they did it partly it's because the administrators of the BCCI know if they owning or being able to run a cricket team is effectively owning half a TV show, isn't it? But you need the other half of the show to work because you can't just sell rights for yourself, right? You need opposition. If you look at Sri Lanka over the last 6-7 years, I think this dates slightly before COVID, but definitely kind of during COVID and since. They've basically had an India team tour or an Indian team has come to Sri Lanka, be it the men's or the women's, every year, which is extraordinary. I don't think there's any other team they've played as much. I know there's a whole, we're getting into the kind of politics of it. Part of that, there's two reasons for that. It's part of it is because the BCCI want to support Sri Lankan cricket because they need it to be a viable thing for India to play against. It's a good rivalry. Unlike other rivals of India, there is no political animosity, or there isn't much political animosity at the moment, and it's a kind of interesting, friendly rivalry. I think it's easy to get to and from both the places. The other reason I think it happens is because they know that at ICC votes or when the bigger things need to happen, SLC will slip in behind them and will support them. What I'm surprised about. Sorry, I know this isn't even what you wanted to. No,
it's definitely interesting. It's super interesting to hear from a Sri Lankan point of view in terms of the politics of, there's much more politics that go on, and you only really get that if you speak to people who are more knowledgeable about that point of view.
So what I find interesting is why don't the ECB and Cricket Australia try and do more to get the Sri Lankans over onto their side, right? Or why aren't they doing more to try and help out other cricket associations, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something they can do because they've had Zimbabwe over, for example, but I think that whole thing of England, especially in Australia, their Test match cricket, high wage economy sells it pays for itself and more because people always want to go see Test matches in England and Australia. Really, I mean, maybe it's starting to wane a little bit because you saw the whole fiasco at Lord's last year in Sri Lanka, but generally you sort of sell out tickets in England.
So my wife's from Australia, so I try and get us to Australia every Christmas because I want to go. She's from Melbourne, so it means I go to MCG on Boxing Day, and I've successfully made that a family tradition in her family. And it's really interesting watching cricket in the MCG because the MCG, I don't know if you've ever been to one, but it's 90,000 seats, right? It's like I was there on Boxing Day. There's 90,000 people descending on this, and I was sitting there and I'm thinking I've paid $30 for a seat. This year, because it was India, the demand was really high. So it was kind of like mid-tier, but I think we still paid like $30 or $40, which is like 25, 30 quid or something like that. Last time I was there, we missed the Pakistan series, but we were there for the South Africa game and we paid $30 and we were right in the bottom. We weren't close to the pitch because you don't want to sit in the sun. You want to sit just behind it. But I was like, these tickets in Lords would be about 100 quid at least. So in Australia, I feel they've made the decision that they want cricket to be a family thing and a mass participation thing. It's not something that they want where the ECB have made the decision, right, we would much rather have Lords at 70% capacity, but everyone pay £130 a ticket than they would go, right, we will... Because, like, me and you both know hundreds of people. Me and you know people who are really into cricket and can tell you bowling averages, batting averages, who go, right, when India come, I'm not missing a day. I'll use all my holiday for the year to go and watch as much of it as I possibly can. We also know people, we know hundreds of people who are nominally India fans, Sri Lanka fans, England fans, South Africa fans, Australia fans, but really beyond maybe their star players, couldn't tell you anything about it, who are never ever going to pay 130 quid for a ticket, over £100 for a ticket,
No,
because they're
they're
just
just
not that
not.
into it. But you could turn around to them and be like, "Hi mate, me and three of my other friends are going to England versus Zimbabwe. I know you're not a Zimbabwe fan or England fan, but the tickets are 20 quid each. Do you fancy Sunday at the Oval?" And they would probably, at that point, at that price, they'd go for it. But I think there's a deliberate calculation to take the game away from mass people, where you go to Australia, it's cheap to get in, the game is on free to air, and it's on, so they show it on free with ads
Yeah.
on their kind of equivalent of ITV, and then they show it on their equivalent of Sky as well. So there's much more effort going on in Australia to try and make it the game of the people, where I really do feel in England they're trying to take it away from people. That's
Yeah, it's interesting. I've definitely thought it's very expensive to go see certain games in England, and I completely agree that you know they're relying on sort of the hospitality, people getting taken out on corporate days, and that's how they're going to make their money. And they've sort of realised we have enough people who don't mind a day out at the cricket and will spend 100 quid for a bit of a jolly, meet some friends, do some business or whatever, and they're happy with that, which is kind of a sad state of affairs, but it's just the way that they want to run the business model, I guess. And it's more, when I was not going to change that, but sorry.
I was in the press box. I was lucky enough to be in the press box for all of the Sri Lanka series, right? And I was in Lords, and I would go down at lunchtime and I'd see a mum and dad or mum and uncle and like 3 kids, and I'll be like, right, each of those tickets 130, kids are like 60 plus I assume they don't live in St John's Wood, right? Let's assume that they live outside of London, so you're like, right, it's going to cost another basically each person to get there is cost between 200 and 150 quid, and at that point I'm like, depending on where they live, they might be able to get cheap flights on EasyJet or Ryanair or even BA if you book during the sales, and could have just gone to Spain for the weekend at a lower price point, right?
I even say that. I'm like, you might as well pay for a flight to go to India, spend 50 quid, and you can go to every single day and fly back at that rate. In India, you're in the box, air conditioned, get tea, get biscuits, whatever. But it's just extortionate, some of the prices you pay in England for test matches.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I was trying to work out. There was one. I was trying to work out. I was like, Sri Lanka's a little bit too expensive to fly to. You need to fly and stay there. You probably need about 1,500 quid. If you're going to fly to Colombo, get yourself to Gaul, stay for 5 days, and come back. But I was like, I'm pretty sure that someone like South Africa, or if you got a good deal for the West Indian to Jamaica or something, if you booked at the right time, it's probably not too far off what 5 days at a Lord's Test would be. But
so next time we'll find a deal and we'll go to one of these Test matches, and
I'd love that. I'd love
have a jolly. But anyway, I mean, I've loved talking about the politics, but just as a matter of time, maybe let's talk about Sri Lanka, and especially 2 players who I've been super interested in. And actually, some of the best performing videos on my channel have been about these players. It's Kamindu Mendis, who I think's just unbelievable. And then you've got Nissanka, who I think is very good, but a little bit like Shimon Gill, he's got a few technical flaws against the moving ball.
Yeah.
So I guess, where do you rate those 2 players against each other, and what are their strengths and weaknesses?
Oh, it's so good. I've been thinking about where I rate them against each other all day. In fact, it's something I've been thinking since the last test. So I'll talk about them individually, and then can I talk about them together? So, because both of them have had quite, I don't want to say strange, but both have had testing times in their careers. So Kamindu actually kind of gets a bit of internet notoriety when he was when he was about 17, 18 years old, because schoolboy cricket in Sri Lanka is massive, and he was bowling. He can bowl ambidextrous, right? I mean, they say he can bowl ambidextrous. There's 2 things about that. There's no real advantage to it, because it's not because the umpire always has to tell the batter
it's not like you can switch bowl like Kevin Peterson.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I'm like, okay, that's slightly moot, and also I think his left hand is actually considerably weaker than his right hand when he bowls. But he got a bit of notoriety when he was younger. He was the captain of his school side, which was quite a big deal in Sri Lanka. Went to the under-19s World Cup. And then that kind of thing happened because no one really follows Sri Lankan first class cricket that closely, where he was kind of in and around the squad for quite a while. And I was starting to think, so he'd made his debut and he'd done all right. Somebody got injured against Australia years ago. And I was starting to think, oh, maybe it's not going to happen for him. And also that thing happens where I just kept seeing him running the water on. And I was like, oh, poor guy. He runs on with such passion and, he's clearly a talented bloke. He's just not going to get his chance. They're going to move on from him. And then he got into the test side last March or April, when they were in Bangladesh, and he basically hasn't looked back since, right? He just scores centuries for fun. Technically, he looks really proficient. The thing that's really impressed me with him and also with Pathum is, I think for me, there's a lot of players in the subcontinent in particular than other parts of the world who really have who have the skills to play international cricket. I talk about this a lot. I was like, but having the skills isn't enough. You need to have the mentality and the mindset to do it. Have you ever read Moneyball?
Yes.
So you know the beginning bit where it talks about Billy Beane's career and how he was like, he's a prodigy
player but couldn't do it.
And it's like cricket is full of players like that, right? I hate calling them out. Yeah, Rab Prakash, Avishka Fernando's a classic Sri Lankan example of it. I'm trying to Nick Knight maybe, like
Thirimanne.
Yeah. Actually, we'll talk about Thirimanne in a bit because I think he might be slightly different though. Like players who like these guys have got the skill set, but they can't kind of get it together. But then Kamindu, he got the opportunity. I don't know whether we're sitting on him for a little bit too long or what happened. I've not read or seen, and I've tried to talk to as many people as I can about this, about what happened, why suddenly it felt like everything had clicked. But he scores test runs for absolute fun. He loves it. But what's really impressed me about him was his turn at the IPL for Sunrisers. I thought it was interesting he got selected. I thought there was an outside chance he might get selected because I still think he hadn't, coming into it, I thought he'd been an all right performer for Sri Lankan T20, but nothing extraordinary. I thought Kamindu Mendis and Pathum and even Chowtha Sri Lanka had been a bit stronger with the bat. But I think because he has different bowling options, I think it's something that put him on the IPL radar. And then I thought, I wasn't sure whether or not how well he'd go in it, but he actually put in some decent performances. Again, he's not going to be somebody who's going to who you want to build a whole franchise around, but I think he's becoming a handy person to have in franchise cricket in your T20 dressing room. He can kind of do a bit of finishing. He can kind of sit there if you want, if he needs to just bat out 8 overs, if you've had an early collapse. And again, right hand bowling, so he can kind of, if you want to change something up, try something different. I imagine the people who do stats and data love him because if you can see a matchup, if you can go, right, if you're bowling against this guy, you need to bowl left arm, whatever, then he might be the kind of guy that Statos love to have because they can get that matchup going. I don't know. So it really surprised me how well he did in the IPL, and that's why I was like, this guy's mentality is the thing that's taken him to the next level. But also, I mean, Kamindu, I think
technically
compared to Pathum,
really, really good as well.
Yeah. I think technically, sometimes when he just gets going, he's one of those players, and the top batters are all like this, where it's like, you basically can't do anything to get him out. He needs to get himself out. You're basically waiting for him to make a mistake or to misread something. It doesn't matter kind of how good you bowl at him. Like, I don't want to compare him to the other greats, but
yeah.
Kind of
no, I definitely saw that in England. Like when he got in and the pitch wasn't doing a massive amounts. Yes, there was a bit of swing, but you just saw that he's very balanced at the crease, gets back on a cross, and just gets in behind everything. When the shot's there, he plays it. There wasn't really a stage where you're like, oh, he's going to nick off here, or he's looking a bit shaky. It's just, he'll just continue to bat him. We'll leave him at the end and just worry about the other side. Whereas if you look at, like, when I look at De Silva, yes, he's played some really good innings, especially when I watched him on the England tour last season. But I've always sort of felt like, yeah, you can get him if he doesn't get forward quite enough, or he might nick off. There's always that thing like, oh, one's coming to get him at some point. It's just whether he can score enough runs before that.
Yeah, the other thing I think people massively underestimate how. So I think for casual fans, we kind of think, oh, once you get like 25, 30 runs, you're just in, right? And then it should be kind of easy. I think it must be really difficult if you're like if you're you sat around batting for like 2.5 hours, you face like 120 balls, you're like 78 runs to just keep going. Like, do you know what I mean? Like the concentration level that's needed for that, because like obviously I've never seen you play cricket. You could be an absolutely superb cricketer, but I think it must be so different if you're standing there in the middle of Lords, in the middle of, you know, Eden Gardens, in the middle of one of these giant big temples of cricket, where all these fans watching you and the best bowlers in the world, and it's like you can't even have any doubt in your mind. It's like every ball you just got to read individually from the previous ball and try and put to it. Any single bit of fatigue or misstep, you're out.
Yeah.
I think fans really underestimate that.
Have you spoken to any players on that in your time in journalism, or have you asked a player, like, does that happen to you, and have they come back and given you an answer?
Do you know what? I haven't actually asked the player that. I'd love to ask a player that. I've talked to a lot of so a lot of players I've talked to. I've talked to them about what is it like stepping up a level. So it's like when you go from being, sometimes, actually there was a guy I went to school with who ended up becoming a professional tennis player, right? And when we were at school, he would just win all. So he started off winning all the tennis tournaments in Ealing. Then he started winning all the tennis tournaments in West London. Then he started winning all the tennis tournaments in London. Then he started winning all the tennis tournaments in England and then Britain and then in Europe. And then by that point, he's like ready to go on the tour. And he was like, no one ever tells you, and this was at the end of his career when he'd retired, he was like, the thing no one ever tells you is basically until you get to the top level, you are the best player you've ever played against or you've ever seen. So you're just not used to losing. And I think that happens, in a team sport like football or rugby, it possibly doesn't happen because you've got a defined role in what you do. So you might be the best goalkeeper in your league, but that doesn't mean you're the best footballer in your league, because there might be another striker who goes on to be a professional footballer as well. Like, if that makes sense. When cricket, if you're batting or if you're bowling, probably until you get to the point of playing definitely kind of first class cricket, you're probably the best player you've ever been around, right? And I've talked to players about how actually it's really weird about suddenly you go into a dressing room and you're not even the best batter in the middle order, right? You're not even the best spinner on the team. And that's, for some professional sports people, that could be a really difficult thing to get their head around. But I've never talked to them about the concentration needed to play top level test cricket. And actually, when you think about it, long test careers are pretty rare.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to get rarer with the proliferation of other formats. I think it's going to be even more difficult to have really long test careers. So I wonder if that might be a kind of skill that ends up being lost, or just very few can master.
Yeah, I think it's probably why you're seeing batsmen, they go for a lot more test matches, because perhaps they don't back their powers of concentration, or, you know, they haven't quite done it in first class cricket. I mean, Kamindu Mendis, it's quite rare that he sort of played a lot of first class cricket, was averaging 60 on, and then came into the side. Whereas lots of players, I don't know how much first class cricket Nissanka played, but I can imagine it's not too much, and he's probably played more ODI cricket, white ball stuff. But yeah, one thing you didn't mention is, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, so Nissanka is quite a so actually, sorry, Sri Lankan cricket culture is quite strange, where they actually make them play as much cricket as they possibly can. So you get like these mad things happen where like people come off earlier this year, I think Dustin Sharnaker came off a flight from Dubai at like 4:00 in the morning and just went straight, like a few hours later, was playing first class cricket for his club. I think it was Dustin Sharnaker, definitely one of the Sri Lankan players who was playing the ILT20, basically there was about 8 hours between them finishing a game in Dubai and them stepping onto a pitch in Colombo somewhere to play it. First class cricket isn't overly followed in Sri Lanka, but there's a lot of it. And there's always a lot of question marks about what the quality is and what the standard is. So there's quite a few players who've got like quite decent averages and they've played a decent amount of it, but no one's really sure what that means in terms of actual international cricket. I think Pathum Nissanka is one of those players who basically will just play as much cricket as he possibly can. I also think that in England and Australia, definitely there's more focus on like what is this player's workloads. Well, I don't think in Sri Lanka cricket anyone ever cares about that. It's just like keep them playing till they fall apart.
Is that even for bowlers as well? And I guess in that first class cricket, is there a lot of fast bowlers? Do they really get tested at the point you're saying that there's not? No one knows how good it
Yeah,
is because media is just bowling 70, 75 mile an hour all day at you on flat wickets.
yeah. So that's a really good question. So most of the pitches they play in are going to be are going to be very, very slow turning pitches. And when you look at kind of who's getting the wickets in Sri Lankan first class cricket, it's always left arm spinners are picking up the wickets. In recent years, we kind of touched upon this earlier, Sri Lanka have actually done quite well in terms of developing a load of seam bowlers. Kind of was never a thing before. And I think they've actually worked on that, kind of almost contrary to what I just said, is they've taken a lot of these players and just worked with them in academies and separately kind of by the side, and then kind of they've unleashed them a bit in first class cricket, but I think there is some level of trying to manage them there. But again, Asita Fernando, I think at one point, from the point when they came to England, I think maybe even to now, basically appears to be in every single squad, and kind of it's only really T20 games they don't play him in. They'll play him in the ODI games. They just seem to again just play him till they break. So to answer your question, yes and no. I think I don't think there's as much strategy as they like us to think there is.
Yeah, just pick the best players and hope they can play. But yeah, on the Sri Lankan fast bowling unit, I think over the years, recent times that I've seen, maybe last 10 years, you always had decent fast bowlers. Like you've sort of got that Lakmal, Prasad, that was one era. And then now you've got Kamara, Vishwa Fernando. Obviously, Patarana's not playing, but those two are two good teamers. Asita Fernando. I mean, I guess Kamara is the only one that really gets it 90 mile an hour. How are Sri Lanka? Are they trying to find more 90 mile an hour bowlers? Because I think that's probably what's holding them back potentially. Or is there just no one else in the country who's coming through that can bowl fast?
So I think this goes back to almost the original conversation we had, where it's like if you can bowl fast, you're learning to bowl 4 effective overs for T20. So they've got someone like Dilshan Madhushankar, a quick tall left armer, and you're like, he could definitely do a job in Test cricket. I don't think we'll ever get to see him play Test cricket, if for no other reason he gets injured too much. Injuries have been, I say a big problem for Sri Lanka. They're a big problem for every fast bowling unit, sorry. And I'm not sure that we possibly manage our fast bowlers well enough. It's interesting with someone like Lakmal, who by the time he finishes his career is quite an accomplished Test bowler, because of the pitches aren't great in Sri Lanka. First class cricket standard, who knows what it's going to be like. He's having to do a lot of learning of his craft on the international stage. Sometimes I feel, and I could be totally wrong, it's like, Australia, you're like thinking, oh, right, that's it. Cummins and Hazelwood are injured. Like, who they going to get? And then, they'll bring out Scott Boland from out of nowhere, making his debut at like 32. And it's just like, where's this guy come from? And he's like another steam train, getting wickets and all that. So I think they are trying to work on stuff, kind of. The innovation, and I know Sri Lanka cricket is, I suppose, well known for innovation. I think is coming in. When you watch even like school teams in Sri Lanka, it's really not uncommon to see slingers. Got Patharana, Nu and Thishara who are slinging it in any league that will have them. That's obviously come down, or single-handedly, I don't want to say created, but rediscovered by Lasith Malinga, and it's just inspired a load of other kids. I know there's like 2 or 3. Others coming through, and if you have any sort of control over a slingy action, IPL sides will look at you as well, and you can get net bowling gigs and that kind of thing. So it can be very quickly quite a lucrative thing or discipline to learn, and I think that might be putting off some athletes from just going for out and out raw pace.
Yeah, so all the talented players sort of, again, it's about the economics, right? What's economically viable as a cricketer? Probably sacrificing a bit of pace, bowling slingers, and net bowling in the IPL, or playing a few games in the IPL, which is it's a bit of a sad state of affairs because obviously, I know, Test cricket fans, I want to see a strong Sri Lanka playing India, playing England, and I want to see good cricket. And I feel like obviously now you've got a good side. I think that's clear. But in 10 years' time, if you don't find a few more batsmen, a few more bowlers, are you going to go, as you said, to the West Indies and just be some a bit part team in international cricket? Is that something that you worry about?
So I think at the moment, so the enthusiasm for cricket in Sri Lanka will never die, right? Sri Lankans will still be playing cricket against each other. If they never get another test match ever again, they'll still be playing cricket against each other in 100 years' time, right? People that are just obsessed by the game, they love the game, they love it on the island. I think really the decision about whether or not how competitive Sri Lanka become as a test team is all at this point is out of the hands of Sri Lanka. They become competitive by having a decent number of fixtures against a variety of teams. If we end up in a situation where Sri Lanka are only playing tests against Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Zimbabwe, then those full sides will never develop outside of those full sides. You might get one moment where suddenly they've got, 3 or 4 good players who are really next level. And then at that point, Australia might want to bring them over for a series. But what they really need, and I don't think it's that difficult to do, is just a calendar where they go, right, the next 6 years, this is where you're going to India at this point, you're going to Australia at this point, you're going to Pakistan at this point, then you're going to India, then you're going to the West Indies. So I kind of think this is what I mean, unless that conversation could be had, and this realisation that controlling one cricket team is only half a TV programme in terms of the finances of it, that they realise both sides have to be competitive. That is what people will watch. Me and you won't watch a game we know is going to be one-sided, right? So if you put on a match, if TNT Sport are showing, I don't know, Pakistan versus the West Indies, and you put it on the West Indies as 700 for 1, me and you are going to we're going to watch it for 10 minutes and then basically lose interest and go, this is nonsense.
I'll wait till Barber's on 299 and then I'll flick it on.
Yeah. You need both sides to be competitive.
Barber's on for a 100 here. We'll watch 10 minutes and see him raise his bat and then go home.
Yeah, exactly, right? You need both sides to be competitive to get as many people interested as possible. If you look at the game, the England-India game, and we haven't had a lot of time to talk about that, but that kind of caught public imagination in London, in the UK, because it was close, right? If England or India had wrapped that game up in 2.5 days, people wouldn't talk about it by Sunday, right? It'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday evening, everyone's going, what's on TV? Right, you need close games to create drama. You need narrative.
Yeah, and I think that's why England now, I'm sort of getting to a stage where it's, let's wait till Australia come, let's wait till India come. Every 4 years you get those two teams touring. They're going to be big series, and then the other years are sort of fillers. Hopefully you get a few good test matches here and there. But yeah, I mean, that test, it was a bit of a shocker from India. I don't know how we managed to lose it. Where do you think India lost it?
Do you know what? I didn't think England had it in them. I think it's the bowling unit, wasn't it, really? If there's two things. If they'd stuck around when you were batting and they'd made 40 runs, then I think it kind of just takes the game away from England that little bit more, and also takes a bit of time out of the game. And they're not, the fielding's not good enough and the bowling's not threatening enough, and it's a bit too hospitable to the batters. I suspect, though, I think this Indian team will improve quite dramatically during the course of this series.
Yeah, I think once Krishna, you saw it in the second innings, he found his length and bowled a lot better.
Yeah. I think sometimes we can underestimate how quickly sub-athletes can adapt and change. I don't think and particularly when you think about how competitive and how difficult it is to be a cricketer in India, the guys they have are smart at playing cricket. I don't want to say they're all smart at everything in their life. I don't know if that's true or not, but they understand cricket. As you said, Krishna really was figuring it out, and I think other Indian players will figure it out. I think we can kind of underestimate how difficult it is to come to English conditions if you've not played here much. So, even if you have been on 1 or 2 tours, if there's any sort of period of time and you're massively used to bowling to your own conditions, it's a shame we don't have kind of tour matches and stuff like that anymore. Because if we did, I think teams have come in a little bit more prepped. But we don't live in a cricket world where we can have everything. We've got what we've got. I think it was a really good test. I think England should feel lucky that they won this, and also not. What they shouldn't think is we could do this 4 more times, or we could do this twice more to get the series win. I think England should say we got away with one there, not this is how we win games. Feeling I get is England are trying to say this is how we win games. I just don't think you can let opposition teams score that many runs and expect to win as more times than not over a 5-test series.
Yeah, I
what
think
do you
you're
think?
going to get bitten.
Yeah,
I think with India, we let them off. We could have put a really big score on the board, but I think the batsmen, they're young. Gill's not played a lot of cricket, so he's going to learn, and he's going to know for next time, I need to make a double 100 there. I need, Jaiswal was going to say I need to make 150 there. And I think it was just first tour, that dismissal of Bashir. I think Gill and Pant in that period, they just went, oh, we're really going to show everyone how good we are. I think maybe in that period they could have said, let's just accumulate, get the 550, and then we can go from there. And then also I think you've got Kuldeep Yadav to come back, and especially with the pitches we're seeing, he's someone who's got the X factor, and that's what India lacked really. They had Bumrah who had the X factor, Siraj and Krishna can chip in, but Kuldeep's the other player who can get good batsmen out on good pitches, and that's what wins you test matches, especially with the way England play. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I think, Mark, I don't know how much time we got left, but one question I have to ask you, and I do want to talk about, is one of my favourite players, one of my favourite Sri Lankan players when I was young. It was always him and Chandimal were like the Kohli and Raina of India for me, or of Sri Lanka for me.
Oh,
what happened to Thirimanne? Yeah. Why did he never make it? Every time I watched him bat, he looked so good.
Oh, do you know what? Right, what would it have been? 21. I was talking to. Was it 20? No, it must have been 2023 or 2022. I think it was the end of 2022. Jared Kimber was trying to put Thirimanne in his most improved test batter of the year, and that was at the end of that year. I think it was the end of that year. He basically called it a day. He ends up becoming quite a good player, but there's kind of 2 things that went against him. Firstly, I think when he came into the side, when he starts to debut, it's still the back end of that kind of really great Sri Lanka side with Dilshan, Mahela and Sangha in it in terms of batting. And so any player that comes into it, everyone just assumes it's got to be at that level, which obviously, like, even those players weren't born at that level. They had to get to that, to their prime selves. And secondly, also, when those players come out the side, there is a period which you could kind of argue Sri Lankan cricket has only started to arise from its slumber out of in the last kind of 18 months or so, where the actual administrators in Sri Lanka and the people looking after the team seem to just not realise how far ODI and T20 cricket have moved. And though Thirimanne was going to be a great test player, he was never going to do anything in T20 cricket, and he wasn't going to do much in ODI cricket. But you get to the 2019 World Cup and he's opening the batting with Dimuth Karunaratne, who are 2 fantastic test players, but they are just so slow at accumulating runs. And at that stage, the game is just like, it's just a totally different game from them. And that became, which also had Chandy and Angelo, ends up becoming a kind of a team that Sri Lankan fans kind of love to hate, and represents everything that Sri Lanka fans seem to hate. And I think Thirimanne got a lot of hate for that. Like a lot of Sri Lankan cricketers, though, he's living in retirement in, I think he's in Melbourne. I'm pretty sure he's in Melbourne, in one of the Melbourne suburbs. And I think he runs a coaching school. So if you ever go out to Melbourne, I think you could actually go and get a one-to-one coaching session with him if you wanted to. Dimuth Karunaratne's opened one up recently after his retirement as well. When he was in his, he did score a century in that 2019 World Cup at one game. I can't remember who he was against. And he was once he got going, he was absolutely fantastic. It just took a long while to get going. Yeah, he was part of a generation of cricketers that were kind of born out of time. If he'd arrived 10 years earlier, I think he would have had a fantastic career, be considered a great, not necessarily a world great, but definitely a Sri Lankan cult hero, where I think the moment he comes, the game just kind of gets away from him. But actually, by the time he retires, I think he's a really accomplished test cricketer. He had really good averages the last few years of his career, and he definitely could have gone on, and I think it was definitely his decision. I think Mickey Arthur was the coach and he retired, and I think it kind of came a bit out of the blue that he retired from international cricket.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad to finally get the backstory from a true Sri Lankan fan, because yeah, he's just one of those players where he came into the side and I was like, this guy could be the new Sankara here. He bats really nicely left-handed, gets behind the ball, but I guess it's just that little bit that he just didn't have, and he was a bit unlucky with his timing as well of when he came into the side. But yeah, what a player on his day, I guess. Anyway,
What
Mark,
a player! What a guy!
And I'll have to go to Melbourne to get a coaching session off him. If they say never meet your heroes, but I'll try.
Yeah, do it. You should do it, definitely. Go to the MCG and get a session from him. That'd be great.
I mean, I'm not sure how much better how much worse he could make me or better, but I think we're out of time, Mark. But I've really appreciated you coming on, hearing more about Sri Lankan cricket. Definitely need to do it again. I felt like there's so many things that we could have discussed and we didn't get around to it. But yeah, Mark, I guess where can people find you? Where do you post all your stuff? And I guess
if you're interested in more Sri Lankan cricket stuff, come to Murali End. I think we're Murali Pod on Twitter, and then Murali End, I think, on Instagram. And you can find me on Instagram, Insta Machado. I'm on Twitter as well, Mark Machado. Come in, get involved, join the conversation. On Twitter, I've basically decided just to troll people now. So yeah, come in, and I'd love to hear what you got to say. If you think I've got something wrong, then let me know.
And if you enjoy food reviews as well, definitely follow Mark on Instagram. He's always at a different restaurant showing off the large treats.
That's my next kind of passion project, to try and become a food blogger or reviewer some way. Wicked. Thanks for having me, Thirimanne.